If you're a plein air painter or landscape artist, you're probably like me. Wherever you go, you just look for inspirations in real world and try to find a interesting composition of subjects, and you would take a lot of photos for them. But in reality, a lot of times, like these photos, even though the composition looks right or the subject looks interesting, the weather is not cooperating. It is not creating interesting forms and shadows for you. So in today's class, I'm going to show you what you can do to turn a gloomy looking weather into a sunny weather. But also I will explain to you how the principles of light and dark works on different surfaces of an object, depending on which direction the sun is coming, so that you can apply these universal principles to any photos that you take and turn a overcast weather into a sunny weather. All right, let's get started. So in order to understand how shadows work in relation to the light source, there really are only three types of surfaces we need to focus on. So we have a directly lit surface, which is this surface actually at the back. Let's call that A. And we also have a parallel surface, which is parallel to the direction the light is hitting the object. Let's call it B. And then we'll also have this, obviously the opposite, kind of facing away from the sun type of surface here. So the way that it's going to turn out is that the light tones, right, will show up on surface A, right? And then the dark tones are going to show up on surface C. So that's something we kind of like, it's easy to understand here. And of course, the objects will create a shadow over here, right? And that's, typically like C is connected to this shadow shape as well. I think what's interesting about the here is like the shape, the shadow shape on the surface B, right? That's parallel to the sun. So what happens with the surface B when we blow up here is that if it's a fully flat, right, like the sun is literally just like kind of coating on top of the surface here, we wouldn't really see any shadows that's like strong, although the tonal value of B will be a bit darker than A, right? However, as long as there are, say, like objects protruding outside on the B surface, say there is, some awnings that's showing up here, and these are objects that sticks out, they will start casting a shadow that is diagonal, parallel to the direction of the light source, really. So what makes this surface interesting is that it creates like that dimensionality based on kind of the unevenness of the surface. So if you're imagining that you're painting a building, you have that sun coming up from, this side. Of course, A will be light, we don't see here, but the B, it will have this shadow that's casted by the rooftop, right? Which then connects it to the surface that's facing away from the sun, which then connects to the shadow, right? That's casted. So this is how like the building will show up if the sun is facing that direction, right? And this is what make the kind of the shape interesting. Imagine have like two small windows, right? The windowsill may cast a little bit of shadow as well. And what's interesting about this is that the higher the light source is, so imagine we have this building here again, right? The light is now pointing more like high up, like a noon, pointing downwards on this. And of course, the shadow will get smaller. But this shadow will get much bigger as well. So sometimes that's why when the painters are doing it, often, they're ignoring kind of this diagonal shape. If the sun's angle is high, then the perception is almost like the entire surface, right? The vertical surface is not directly in contact with the sun, will all look to be a bit darker. So they can all become like one value mass. Maybe this surface will be like slightly lighter, But, once you connect that as one surface, you can easily tell that this is like noon and this is like morning, right? Or dusk, sunset, something like that. So this is how the principles of the shadow work, and that really applies to kind of any universal shapes and objects. So now we know how shadows behave in principle. Then let's look at this reference photo we're aiming to paint and apply that rule of shadows to it, which I think will really bring to life the scene and will help us further simplify it, right? That's the beauty, because then we're really painting the shadow shape as versus trying to paint every single details out of the scene. So let me make this base photo a little bit lighter. So imagine everything is a light wash for the base, and on this layer I will draw out kind of the shadows. So again, the sun is coming in right from kind of behind this building, like on the right hand side. So this side, actually, this facade, all the facade facing like the right hand side will be like brightly lit. So what that means is that, for the shadows, this building, right, you will have a diagonal shadow that's casted by this roof line that's going down this direction. And that will be quite strong. Then this entire side of the building, this very narrow arrow shape, will be really the darkest shadow. It's a little bit painful in trying to paint with the mouse, right? And similarly for these figures in the foreground, they will have the left side, right, of their shape kind of being darkened. Usually the legs will get darker because the body is shading the legs. So they will definitely create a bit of shadow on themselves. So the leg that's pushing backwards, may have more like sunlight. So these shadows, these figures will be kind of shaded like that. Now this building, what it's going to do is that it's going to push its shadow all the way this way across the street, which is why I like this composition in the first place, because I do like the fact that it's connecting the two sides of these buildings at the front in a way. So actually, like, I can even exaggerate and make this building go all the way here, shadow, right? And now what happens is that now this truck will be can be moved backwards, and this truck will be inside the shadow. And I'll probably just need one car. Now that made this shadow immediately more interesting, because it's kind of like a silhouette now, right? So then that figure I want like to be crossing the street can be like actually in sunlit position again, right? So similarly for this truck here, this old truck, it will have a silhouette now in some of this interior. So you may have some interesting shadow as well. That looks like this. There's a gap between the wheel and the casted shadow. So this guy now plays a role in inviting the viewer into the scene as well. What may look good is like maybe in the foreground there could be further shadow because there's building behind the viewer, and that can be casting shadows too. So all of these cars, the only side that will get really darkened is actually their front side and then their shadow. So all these cars will look somewhat like this. So you're only depicting kind of the part that's more shaded. So when you paint cars like that, I probably would need to have way less car, like maybe have a bigger gap somewhere, but we're having too many cars right now. Yeah, the cars, it's important. The wheels is always important, and the shadows underneath the car is important. So that's how the car is going to get shaded. Now, these awnings, they will all be kind of bright, right? With the exception of like this side. And maybe the exception of this part of the roof will be a little bit darker. But what's going to happen is that I think I'm not going to include these banners. So it'll be the shape of this awning. So what's going to happen is that these awnings, because the sun are hitting them, so the top of it will be very bright, but they will cast a pretty strong shadow for the first floor display window here. So that's the shape we're going to be focusing on. Now for this building, it's at a 45-degree angle. So it follows the same principle in general for like that 45-degree kind of diagonal shape. So ideally it would be like this diagonal shape, but I think the diagonal shape could be a bit too complicated to depict. So I'm just going to encase this entire building into like the shadow area. I think that will work. Same with this building's sides, right? So then that will further simplify things, right? So when you look at simplification, making an entire surface into the shadow or making an entire surface into the sun, that immediately simplifies things because the value for these shape will be the same. So then you're really focusing on the value maths for these scenes. So yeah, the awning here is going to cast some shadows as well as this building. So maybe there will be some bushes in the foreground, but all you need to do is just really focus on kind of the shadow shape. Now we're getting closer to this key building. So for this building, of course, the thing I like about this lighting is that it creates the three-dimensionality. So this building simultaneously have the light side and the dark side, which means it will make its shape come through really clearly. So it will be something like this, only focus on the left-hand side being the shaded part. So see, once you do that, like the building, its signature shape is going to come through. Okay. This shadow, this building behind it will be also in the shadow, but the key is that you may want to make these roof a little bit darker than the background so that it will come across as two separated objects, right? So this one I just highlighted, it's a lighter shade as compared to this one on the roof line. Cool. So all of the buildings in the distance, we're going to depict just some, boxy shapes and some side angles. It doesn't matter like the detail as much as the foreground. But when we get to these two buildings in the background, we'll need to focus on like maybe the shadow again. So we'll have a little bit of like cast a shadow on the left-hand side. For this roof, yeah, it will need to be pretty clear what the shape is on the left-hand side as well. But for the trees here in the surrounding these buildings, basically, they will be all like soft edge. So it'll be something like, whoops, that's so hard edge. Be something like this, right? Just the left-hand side of the trees will have some shadows. So kind of blending with the hard edge and make them actually pop more. Yeah. So just checking what else needs work. I don't think I'm going to include this electric post. This area, its role is really to release all of these, details in the background. I think this kind of distracts that very clean arrow shape that we are talking about that you want in the foreground. So yeah, I think just checking if there's any other areas. Yeah, so this will turn out to be our like main shape that we'll be focused on painting Yeah, when you look at that way, you're able to tie the objects in the scene together without feeling, disjointed. Let's dive in then and tackle the actual painting, which hopefully will go faster because for this video, I mainly just want to illustrate to you guys these techniques for working with a complex cityscape. For the light wash, you see me incorporating the trees in the distance as part of this wash. That is because I really do want to maintain a lot of soft edges, such as the trees blending with the sky, as well as the buildings, so that that soft edge can really contrast with the sharp shapes casted by the buildings later on. And also, when there are so many buildings of different colors and sizes, it's just best to ignore them altogether and use the wet on wet techniques just to add a dot of color here and there to suggest, these are different colors. But in the end, it will look more cohesive as one value mass. I have also made the decision to make the front building red instead of black. Not only because I know this building used to be red before they recently painted it, but also because the scene really calls for that emanating warmth, and the red would just look better than black, and it echoes some of the other red accent on the other buildings in the scene. And now here is the main shadow shapes we're going to focus painting on. One thing to call out here is that because there's quite a bit of depth in the scene, like the shadows that's further away from us is going to be cooler, lighter, as well as lower contrast as compared to the objects in the foreground, which will have much stronger shadow, much darker, and also a bit more warm. All right, so we're just adding finishing touches, and here we have the finished painting. So when you compare the original photo with this painting, you can't really see all of the individual objects. What you see are these shapes that invites the viewer into the scene, and then connecting the buildings from the left to right. And it also moves your gazes upwards until it lands on the church building in the distance, which is exactly the composition I set out to do in the first place. All right, so that is the end of today's class. I hope you guys have learned something new from it. And of course, I appreciate you liking, subscribing, and please commenting and let me know what you think if you enjoy the video. I also have an exciting news that I will be launching my Patreon offerings in the new year of 2025, where I'll be teaching 2 live online classes every month, one geared towards beginner level and the other intermediary to advanced levels, so that you will really get a chance to get your questions answered, see how I plan and execute a painting in real life, but also learn the fundamentals of watercolor techniques, get familiar with the medium, as well as building your painterly skills. There will be several subscription tiers available, depending on how much interactivity and personal guidance that you need from me. All right, more details to come, and I'm super excited. I'll let you guys know when it's available for sign up. So that is all for today, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the next video. Bye.